Imagine discovering your family was hiding secrets so profound they could shake society's very foundations. Stories that rarely reach our ears are kept by the Appalachian Mountains, lost between isolated valleys and communities living on the fringes of time. She had 14 children with her own brother, the purest woman from the Kentucky forests. A case that lay buried in the shadows for almost 2 centuries is what I will reveal to you today. Merely a woman of the countryside was not Martha Sullivan. Within her womb, she carried the weight of a family tradition that defied the laws of both nature and society. Your view on the limits of family loyalty may be changed forever by what you are about to discover in the next few minutes, along with the price paid by those born fruits of pure blood. Be sure to subscribe to the channel right now if historical investigations that unveil the darkest truths of the human condition appeal to you. A story seldom told outside close academic circles is what you must prepare yourself to learn. How witnesses like isolation and distorted beliefs can create generations marked by a devastating genetic legacy is what this narrative shows. Only stacked stones and rotting boards remain between the deep valleys and green hills of Kentucky, where sunlight rarely penetrates the dense tree cover. The silent traces of the Sullivan property, founded in 1798, are these a place the region's inhabitants avoid to this very day. As if the earth itself still holds the memory of the children born there with deformed faces and incomplete minds, the wind seems to carry whispers through the ancient oaks. We are not merely contemplating the remains of a house when we look upon these ruins, we must understand this. The physical testimony of a terrible philosophy is what we are facing, the belief that the family blood's purity must be preserved at any cost. The muffled cries of babies born with extra fingers and malformed hearts accompanied the farming, far from the thunder that often punished these mountains, while the family patriarch, Ebenezer Sullivan, proudly proclaimed, "Our blood will remain pure as gold, without the taint of outsiders." Over the ruins, the clouds gather once more, a dark omen of what was to come in this story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any investigation if you wish to follow more cases like this one, which shake society to its core and reveal hidden truths. Approximately 320 acres of rugged land in the mountains of Harlan County, Kentucky, was what the Sullivan property stretched for. At its center rose a 2-story, 8-room wooden house, surrounded by barns, stables, and smaller huts for hired workers. By the family, a rigid internal hierarchy was kept. Ebenezer was at the top, followed by his sons, then the women born as Sullivans, and finally the temporary workers who never stayed more than a single season. Through the valley, the sound of an iron bell echoed at 4 a.m., calling everyone to their functions. Preparing food, weaving clothes, and caring for the younger children was how the women spent 16 hours a day, while the men worked at hunting, agriculture, and occasional trade with distant villages. Through constant surveillance, control was exercised. Every movement on the property could be observed by Ebenezer from strategically positioned windows. Built from dark oak trunks, the family chapel housed not only prayers but also meetings where weddings between cousins and close relatives were decided. The patriarch's arrival was announced by the creak of the floorboards, and everyone would fall absolutely silent. Away from external eyes, births occurred in the basement of the main house when snow covered the mountains and completely isolated the property for months. During the particularly severe winter of 1823 was when Martha Sullivan came into the world, her penetrating blue eyes seeming to contain a knowledge far beyond her age. The future of the family lineage in her womb was what that child, unknowingly, carried. As she grew up, extraordinary skills that distinguished her among her family members were shown by Martha Sullivan. The medicinal properties of 73 different plants growing in the surrounding forests were already known to her by the age of 9. Her ability to memorize biblical texts impressed even the itinerant pastor who visited the region annually. While the other girls in the family remained confined to the property's limits, special permission from her father was received by Martha to accompany the men on their occasional trading trips to the village of Cumberland, 12 miles away. Social interactions would be carefully observed by her on these rare forays into the outside world, absorbing information about medicine, science, and world news, while she never revealed details about her own family. Within the Sullivan community, a privileged position was held by Martha. The only woman authorized to attend the family meetings where important matters were discussed was her. The inhabitants of the surrounding area sought her healing skills, allowing her to cross the invisible border between Sullivan isolation and the rest of society. "The girl has the gift of healing hands and a tongue that does not speak of our places," they said, trusting her while remaining fearful of the rest of the family. Gathering specific herbs that only flourish in that light was when Martha could be seen during nights of the full moon, moving like a shadow between the trees, carrying knowledge passed down by generations of Sullivan women. In this resided the paradox precisely. The more valuable she became to the external community, the more indispensable she became for the family's internal plans, especially to her brother Jeremiah, only 2 years older, who watched her with growing interest as they both matured. Never give up the truth. Leave in the comments if you believe justice must reach all the oppressed. Gradually, like shadows lengthening at dusk, the horrors on the Sullivan property manifested themselves. The whispers about the birth of cousin Robert in 1825 came first. With 6 fingers on each hand and unable to make any sound beyond primitive grunts, he was kept in the attic and fed through a hatch. Then came cousin Elizabeth, born in 1827 from the marriage between an uncle and his niece, her skin covered in bluish spots and her eyes so wide-set it seemed impossible for them to focus on the same object simultaneously. The son of first-degree cousins, Frederick, was born in 1829, who by the age of 3 still could not hold his head up alone, dying during a particularly violent seizure before he turned 5. The adult's reactions, denial, rationalization, and finally, supernatural or religious explanations that never questioned the practice of consanguineous marriages, were observed by Martha with each problematic birth. When the daughter of cousins Henry and Victoria was born without eyes in 1831, "It is a divine trial, not a signal to change our ways," was declared by Patriarch Ebenezer, as witnessed by Martha. At that moment, quietly, Martha's inner transformation began, like water slowly eroding stone. As she helped the midwife, her face remained impassive, but something fundamental had changed inside her. "I saw the eyeless face of an innocent today, and I realized it was not God who created this incomplete creature, but the choices of men who consider themselves above the laws of nature," she wrote with trembling letters in her diary, found decades later. On April 16, 1834, Martha's world definitively collapsed, when her youngest sister, Sarah, a girl of only 9 with a crystalline laugh and golden hair, was declared ready for the family pact. The only person to whom Martha openly showed affection was Sarah. A small room under the main house's roof was shared by the two, where Martha secretly taught her sister to read and write, contrary to family rules that considered female education unnecessary beyond basic domestic knowledge. To the family chapel, Sarah was taken that spring morning, where the patriarch announced her future marriage to her 42-year-old cousin, Herbert Sullivan, a man known for his cruelty to animals and violent temperament. When Martha protested during the ceremony, she was forced to witness her sister's punishment. Her hair was forcibly cut, followed by 3 days of confinement in the granary without proper water. When they finally allowed Martha to bring water to Sarah on the 3rd day, she found her sister burning with fever, raving about black angels with iron claws. Applying cold compresses and preparing medicinal infusions was how Martha spent 72 uninterrupted hours, holding the small, warm hand between her own. She felt Sarah's fingers relax within her grasp at dawn on the 4th day. With no tears or external signs of mourning, Martha washed her sister's body with wild rose water, wrapped her in the white linen fabric intended for her own wedding dress, and placed a small cloth doll, the last secret gift for Sarah, next to her body before the burial. That night, alone under the starlight, a silent oath was taken by Martha before the simple tomb. For every tear not shed, for every scream suffocated, there would be a reckoning. Mutually reinforcing pillars of authority composed the system that propped up the Sullivan property. At the center ruled Ebenezer Sullivan, then 63, with a firm hand and religious rhetoric, citing distorted biblical passages to justify isolation and internal marriages. Administering physical punishment was the charge of his firstborn, Jeremiah, 25, who had developed particular methods that left no visible marks, such as using wet towels to discipline transgressors. The financial aspects were supervised by Uncle Thaddeus, Ebenezer's younger brother, who made semi-annual trips to sell the property's products and buy supplies, occasionally bringing desperate women from distant villages to partially renew the family blood. Not a relative but complicit for convenience, Reverend Blackwood visited the property quarterly to officiate unions and baptisms, receiving generous compensation for his silence. During the celebration of Ebenezer's 65th birthday in October 1836, the growing tension reached an irreversible point. To ensure the continuity of our purist lineage, I declare that Martha and Jeremiah will unite their lives and blood at the next full moon, the patriarch announced in the presence of the entire gathered family. Martha, then 19, watched her brother's face break into a smile as her relatives applauded the decision. That same night, from behind the door, she listened to the detailed plan Ebenezer revealed to Jeremiah. You will produce the next generation of Sullivan leaders. Your children, born of the purest blood of our lineage, will be raised under my direct supervision to continue our tradition when I am gone. That she had reached the point of no return was understood by Martha then. It was not just her future at stake, but generations yet to be born. The purification ritual that preceded all Sullivan marriages was what Martha was subjected to on November 7, 1836. Naked and bathed in herbs by 3 older women of the family, she remained silent as they sang ancient songs brought from the British Isles. With white ribbons symbolizing purity, her long brown hair was braided, while Aunt Agnes whispered instructions about her marital duties, the details of which made her stomach turn. Dressed in a white nightgown made especially for the occasion, she was led into the center of the family circle where Ebenezer and Jeremiah were waiting. Her right hand was held by the patriarch and his son her left, lifting them above his head as he proclaimed, "This blood belongs only to the Sullivans, will remain among the Sullivans, and will generate new Sullivans." When Martha suddenly fainted, falling hard against the wooden floor, the ceremony was interrupted. It was merely feminine nervousness, stated the family doctor, Dr. Thompson, an alcoholic whose medical license had been revoked years earlier, who recommended rest until the wedding day. Under constant surveillance in the room she had once shared with Sarah, Martha was kept during her supposed recovery. Through the narrow window, she watched the wedding preparations, the chapel being decorated with pine boughs, the construction of the new cabin where she would live with Jeremiah, the relatives arriving from neighboring properties. An impassive mask became her face, once expressive and lively. "The girl has lost her soul," commented one of the aunts. "It is the price of purity," replied another. On the night of November 11, 1836, the plan she had been silently elaborating since Sarah's death was executed by Martha. Using knowledge acquired during years of observation and secret study, a combination of sleep-inducing herbs had been mingled with the celebration wine by her. While the Sullivans drank and celebrated the union scheduled for the next day, Martha remained sober, watching the heavy eyelids and increasingly sluggish movements of the guests. When the last one had fallen into a deep sleep, including the guards designated to watch her, each element of her meticulously structured plan was put into action by her. First, a small bag containing gold coins she had collected over the years by secretly selling medicinal herbs to the surrounding inhabitants was retrieved from a hiding place under a loose floorboard. She then put on the men's clothes she had prepared beforehand, cutting her long hair short with the knife she kept sharpened under her mattress. A group of 5 children, all born with deformities resulting from consanguineous unions, who had been kept hidden in various corners of the property, was gathered by her. With silent, precise movements, the children were led from the main house to the stable by her, where 2 horses were already saddled. The date chosen was not accidental, she had purposely coincided it with the new moon, ensuring maximum darkness for their escape. The countdown she had mentally kept for months had finally reached 0. "Today we are born again," she whispered to the frightened children as she helped them onto the horses. At their peak were the wedding preparations back on the Sullivan property. The path from the main house to the chapel was illuminated by oil lanterns, where Reverend Blackwood, already drunk, rehearsed the ceremony's words. Over the empty bed, the white dress was arranged by 3 Sullivan aunts in the room destined for the bride, arguing over which of them would have the honor of placing the traditional family veil. In the kitchen, a whole pig roasted slowly over the fire, while women prepared breads and sweets for the feast that would, by tradition, last 2 days. Simultaneously, miles away, each phase of her plan was executed by Martha Sullivan with the precision of a watchmaker. In the shadows of the dense forest, dark dyes, a camouflage prepared days before from walnuts and coal, were applied to the children's faces and her own. Two of the little ones, unable to ride alone due to limb deformities, were secured to her body with leather straps. The reins of the second horse, where the other two children balanced, were firmly held by the oldest of the five, a 12-year-old boy who had never developed articulated speech but understood instructions. The noise of hooves against the soft forest soil and the occasional hoot of an owl gradually replaced the distant sound of music and laughter. When the first light of dawn began to tinge the horizon, the plan's first stage had been reached by the small group, a hunter's abandoned cabin, 15 miles from the Sullivan property, where Martha had secretly stockpiled supplies for months. The prearranged signal, 3 short whistles, was given to confirm they had reached the first safe point. In meticulously timed steps, Martha Sullivan executed her plan in the early hours of November 12, 1836. First phase, infiltration. Silently into the patriarch's quarters, where the family documents were kept, she slipped with movements learned from observing hunters, and recovered the birth certificates and the family record book that documented generations of consanguineous marriages. Second phase, strategic isolation. The strings of the alarm bell were cut by her and the wheels were removed from the carts to hinder any pursuit. Third phase, liberation. The 5 hidden children, the ones with visible deformities kept in various secret compartments around the property, were freed by her. For every adult who had participated directly in the cruelties, a specific mark was left by Martha. For the uncle who had flogged Sarah, a strand of her sister's golden hair upon his pillow. For cousin Herbert, the man intended for Sarah, a child's drawing the girl had made weeks before her death. Leaning over Jeremiah, found in a deep sleep, "Sullivan blood ends here," she whispered in his ear. In Patriarch Ebenezer's room, the record book was left open to the page documenting the birth and premature death of 23 children in the last 15 years, all with congenital deformities, with a single sentence written in the margin, "It was not God who created these monsters." By the time the fire began to consume the barn where Sarah had been punished to death, the 5 children were already being guided along a forest trail by Martha, leaving behind only silence. A precise script was followed by the exodus led by Martha. First, the stop at the hunter's cabin, where the horses marked with the Sullivan symbol were exchanged for less identifiable mules. Then, for less visibility, they split into 2 groups, following secondary trails and avoiding main roads where news of their escape would surely spread. In advance, a meeting with Rebecca Thornton had been arranged by Martha, a midwife and herbalist who lived on the fringes of society and sympathized with her cause after witnessing the results of consanguineous marriages in Sullivan children occasionally brought to her for treatment. In Rebecca's simple house, a makeshift ritual was organized by Martha. A lock of hair was cut by her from each child, burned along with the wedding dress she had secretly taken from the main house, and the ashes were mixed with soil, a young oak tree planted in this symbolically enriched earth. "This tree will mark the end of one cycle and the beginning of another," she explained to the children, who watched with wide eyes. Calculated resistance was included in the plan. Martha knew some of the children, conditioned by the oppressive environment, would fear the unknown outside world. For the 6-year-old girl who refused to leave the hiding spot at Rebecca's house, old lullabies were softly sung by her until the child fell asleep in her arms. To the older boy who tried to flee back to the security of the Sullivan property, no orders were given by her, only a choice, the first true choice any Sullivan had ever been offered. When they finally departed, a small column was formed by them, Martha at the front, each child carrying only one significant personal object, and Rebecca closing the rear. In the distance, smoke was still visible, rising like a grey column against the blue November sky, marking the place where generations of Sullivans had perpetuated their cycle of isolation and genetic degeneration. Like wildfire through the county spread the news of the events on the Sullivan property. The Harlan County Sheriff, initially reluctant to investigate the internal affairs of the isolated family, was forced to act when flames consumed a significant part of the property. With bureaucratic language, his official report, preserved in the county archives, describes what he found: structures damaged by a seemingly deliberate fire, several individuals in a comatose state from ingesting an unknown substance, and the disappearance of an adult woman, MS, and 5 minors. The Sullivan case represents a potential threat to the social and moral order. Maximum discretion is recommended, reveals the correspondence between local and state authorities, showing increasing alarm. By December 1836, that 3 other isolated properties in the Appalachian Mountains, all with histories of marriages between close relatives, suffered similar events is indicated by records: children with deformities gone missing, compromising family documents mysteriously exposed to the community. In February 1837, a confidential report mentioning the emergence of a Sullivan method, a term used to describe the systematic liberation of children born from consanguineous unions and the exposure of family records, was received by the governor of Kentucky. Only indirectly to the events was referred by the press of the time, limited by social conventions, mentioning disturbances in isolated communities and a renewed interest of the authorities in matrimonial practices in the mountainous regions. Among the families who maintained similar traditions, however, panic was palpable. "We must disperse the children immediately," reveal private documents, showing frantic correspondence. In contrast, among marginalized communities and abolitionist groups, hopeful whispers circulated about the woman who frees the forgotten. Swift and severe was the state's response to Martha's escape and the subsequent wave of liberations. In March 1837, the formation of a special force composed of 6 experienced rangers, led by Captain William Harrington, a veteran of the Indian Wars known for his relentless efficiency, was secretly authorized by Governor James Clark. Through 5 counties, the group's trail was followed by them using tracking techniques honed over years of pursuing fugitive slaves. A progressive siege strategy gradually reduced the available territory for hiding, while agents infiltrated marginal communities, trading money for information. The first capture occurred in April 1837, 2 of the children found in a Shaker community that had welcomed them without question. By June, the siege tightened when a traveling merchant, tempted by a substantial reward, revealed he had transported a young woman with short hair, accompanied by 3 deformed children, across the Ohio River. From an unexpected source came the final betrayal. Reverend Michaels, who had initially offered the group sanctuary in his small rural church, gave up their location after authorities pressured him, threatening to investigate his own questionable financial practices. On August 17, 1837, in an isolated cabin near Cincinnati, the decisive confrontation took place. How Martha, realizing they were surrounded, organized the escape of the remaining 3 children through a previously prepared tunnel while she remained behind to delay their pursuers is described by unofficial reports. When the rangers broke down the door, they found her sitting calmly at a table, the Sullivan documents organized before her and a small, empty bottle of poison in her hand, state witnesses. "Sullivan blood now runs free around the world. You will never find them all," were her last words, recorded by Captain Harrington in his personal diary. From a family scandal into a regional legend was how Martha Sullivan's story gradually transformed in the decades following her death. Around her figure, a body of oral traditions developed within the isolated communities of the Appalachians. A woman with short hair guiding children through the forest on moonless nights was sworn to be seen by hunters. Protection was discreetly offered by midwives to newborns with deformities, citing the Martha Way as justification. Nocturnal visits from a female presence who left small cloth dolls, similar to the one Martha had placed in Sarah's coffin, as a silent warning were reported by families that maintained practices of consanguineous marriage. Near mythical status was acquired by objects associated with her story. The Sullivan family record book, paradoxically spared from the fire, passed through several hands before being anonymously donated to the Kentucky Historical Society in 1867, where it remains an important document on the period's matrimonial practices. In isolated rural communities, her memory was preserved by folkloric songs through coded verses. The midnight lady takes the marked little ones, when the moon is hid and the watchmen sleep. From 1870 onward, a significant decline in marriages between close relatives occurred in the mountainous regions, a phenomenon academic historians attribute to growing social and economic integration, while local tradition credits the Sullivan effect. An annual tradition among families with histories of congenital deficiencies became discreet pilgrimages to Martha's alleged burial site, a small, unmarked mound near the Ohio-Kentucky border. In impressive contrast to the official records that minimized her existence, a lasting symbol of resistance against practices that sacrificed innocent lives on the altar of distorted traditions was what popular memory turned Martha Sullivan into. In certain isolated Appalachian communities, even today, When a child is born with extra fingers or other signs of consanguinity, this child has the touch of Martha, is whispered by the elders. Because you care about these stories that have marked our country forever is why you have watched this far. I watched here, leave a comment saying, so that I can get to know you and see who truly cares about the search for historical truth. If the story of Martha Sullivan touched your heart, like this video. So that the memory of Martha Sullivan is never forgotten, share it.